I haven't bought food for probably a year and a half. Initially, it wasn't entirely surrounding food waste. I would take like an hour every day to go through every floor in my residence hall and sort all the crap that people would thrown in there. And usually I could turn a mountain of garbage into like a shopping bag. I started to realize that the world had this huge waste problem, and I would sort of look for it in other places, and I wanted to figure out where our primary points of waste production were. Conservative estimates are that we waste about 40% of the world's food production. And everyone's complaining like, oh, we've got this growing population, we can't afford to feed these people, what are we going to do? We need more farmland, we got to clear more forests. We have the capacity to feed, a lot more people, but we just don't use it efficiently. We're selfish with what we have. Consumers go into a supermarket expecting that there's going to be this, perfect, aesthetically beautiful selection of, everything they could possibly imagine in front of them, and they'll pick, the shiniest apple, with no blemish, and they say, this is the only apple that is worth my, 78 cents. And they'll put it in their plastic bag, and they'll go home, and they'll let it sit on the counter, and after a couple days it gets a little soft and throw it away. It's just really sad. When I was studying abroad, I lived in Florence for a little while. It was great. And then afterwards I went to live at this free house. At this house, the owner would take in travelers from all over the world, no matter where they were coming from, no matter how many people it was or how long they wanted to stay. And he'd cram us all in this tiny little house. And it was great. I met people from everywhere. But we'd spend most of the days either working in a garden or doing some sort of community work elsewhere, or clearing forest paths at a Buddhist temple up in one of the mountains. It was really neat. But the way they fed everyone was, pretty much just salvaging food from local supermarkets. And eventually, after, a week, I was one of the most senior members of the house because, we cycled through people really quickly. So I stayed there for about a month or so. And eventually I just became the guy who was in charge of feeding 20 people a day. And, largely that was entirely from food waste. So I sort of began to realize that this is a really enormous problem. So most people, when I say, yeah, I like to go dumpster diving to find food, they imagine some guy like going through your kitchen trash and, pulling out remnants of chicken bones, like biting little bits out. It's nothing like that. That's disgusting. So they don't understand that it's, mass like crates of fresh vegetables and, hummus and yogurts and cake mixes or whatever that are being thrown away. One day I may find like 100 pounds of cheese or something, and then the next day it's most of the produce, and then the next day it's like the bread. So they kind of cycle through the store. Dumpster diving's fun, and I don't know. No one really wants to eat out of a dumpster primarily, and I don't really have to. I've saved enough money doing this for long enough that I can buy food if I wanted to. But I feel almost like I have this socio-environmental obligation now to take care of some of this food waste, because when I go to the store and buy food, especially fresh food, what that's doing is again sending a message like, you need to produce more of this because there's demand for it, and we produce plenty. So I feel like I can't really justify going to the store and buying new food and stimulating more demand, putting more stress on our soils, and using more water to produce these things when they're perfectly accessible as is. My brother always told me when I was growing up that if you live like no one else will for a time, eventually you can live like no one else can. Yeah, so it's 74 square feet or something like that. This kind of off-the-wall idea hit. I was following the tiny house movement for a while, and so I started to pursue that and collect wood that I found out in town. I mentioned like pallets or big old pieces of plywood that were used for support in construction projects or something. They're just being tossed away, burned, whatever. So I snagged a few of them just to wake up in the morning in your own little spot, and it smells like, champa, cinnamon candles or whatever. I don't know, it's just homey, so.
Most of the stuff does fit in the house just fine, but what I found is that I don't use most of it. I'll go to bed and take off my pants and then put them back on in the morning. So I don't know. That's something that I've really found, is that I don't use stuff unless it's like right in front of me and readily accessible, and so it's helped me realize that I don't really need to have as much as I do. So I would like to start going through things and giving them away.
You know, the thing is, I don't live a really burdened life. I feel like I have everything I need, and part of that is because of, I made that initial sacrifice of just some ease, some convenience, and now this just feels normal to me. And now I really enjoy, going outside every night and chopping wood before I go to bed. Like, it's kind of therapeutic. But just, taking things and making them a little bit harder, eliminating convenience, allows me to really appreciate the value of my own time and the value of the things that I have. It's really doable, but we've structured our society to, really actively not consider ways that we can just simply change our lifestyles to be more, cost effective and energy efficient and sustainable.